Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's devotion. We are in Luke chapter 20, and the conflict between Jesus and um, the Sadducees, the religious elites, really comes to a head today. And in Luke chapter 20, what we see is a series of conflicts between these two, and with each one, the tension between them gets even worse. So one of the things that the religious elites do is they try to challenge Jesus, challenge his authority, they challenge his teaching, they challenge his person, all in an effort to get the people to turn against him. Um, but eventually, they will discover that that method won't work. Notice, first of all, they challenge his authority. And so you see that Jesus is teaching the people in the temple. That's significant because of Jesus had just cleansed the temple. And he's preaching the gospel, and the chief priests and the elders and the scribes all come up to them. They ask this, in verse 2. Tell us by what authority you do these things, or who it is that gave you this authority. Right? To them, Jesus is an uneducated redneck from small town of Nazareth in Galilee. Right? He doesn't have the credentials to make the claims he's making and to challenge them the way that he challenges them. And so they want to know what are his credentials. And so Jesus says, tell you what, I'll answer your question when you answer my question first. So, verse 4, was the baptism of John from heaven or from man? Now, it's a trick question. Because as Luke shows us, if they say it's from heaven, the people will ask, well, why didn't you believe in him? If they say it's from man, well, then the people will reject the religious elites because they consider John a prophet. It's a catch-22, if you will. And because it's a trick question, they can't answer it. And because they can't answer it, they won't answer it. And so they just come out and say, we do not know where it came from. So Jesus says, well, I ain't going to give you my answer. Now, I think what we have going on here is that Jesus is showing that their rejection of John was not based off of truth, but based off of power or position or something like that. Because if they said that John was from heaven, which they know is the right answer, they know that's the answer Jesus wanted to get out of them, then they are accountable for their rejection of him. And Jesus is showing subtly, you rejected John who was sent from heaven. You reject me. Why am I wasting my time with you again, right? But notice that Jesus goes from this non-answer from them to a parable about their wickedness. And so I don't want to spend a lot of time because there's a lot going on in this chapter. It's the parable of the wicked tenants. Verse 10, when the time came, the owner who planted a vineyard sent servants to the tenants so they would give some of the fruit of the vineyard, but the tenants beat him and sent him away empty handed. So what you have going on here is you have an owner of a vineyard who plants the vineyard, and then he goes to another town, and he trusts the care of the vineyard to some tenants. This is very typical of this time. So when it came time to get the fruit of the labor, the owner sends servants to the tenants to get it, to get the produce and the profits and whatnot. Well, they reason if we get rid of the servants, then we can take the profits for ourselves. And so he sends the first servants, they kill, they beat them up. Second, they beat them up. Third, they beat them up. And then we get there in verse 13, the owner of the vineyard said, what shall I do? I will send my son, perhaps they will respect him. And the tenant said, this is the heir, let us kill him so that the inheritance may be ours. Now this has to do with some of the legality of how property and whatnot pass from one group of people to another. But you can see where Jesus is going with all of this. Jesus is the Son of God, whom was sent by the Father, and he's looking at the religious elites and say, these are the evil tenants who not only persecuted the prophets before them, he has already said that on multiple occasions in Luke, but they will kill me. So he'll conclude, verse 18, everyone who falls on that stone, he's quoting from Psalm 118, will be broken to pieces, and when it falls on anyone, it will crush him. This is a word of warning to the wicked tenants, that is the religious elites, that though they will kill Jesus, in so doing, judgment will fall on them. Well, this leads to more questions and more efforts to trick Jesus and to get the people to reject them. And so it says there, verse 19, that the scribes and the chief priests sought to lay hands on him at that very hour, for they perceived that he had told this parable against them. Right? It's kind of obvious, right? And so they sent spies to go against Jesus. I mean, just kind of ridiculous. And this is the question that the spies come up with, right? They're going to lay a trap for Jesus. Is it lawful for us to give tribute to Caesar or not? Now, this is a question of politics, and if you are alive right now, you know that any question or any discussion regarding politics will garner heated debate. Right? And just on the surface, what you have here is the question between loyalty to Caesar and rebellion against Caesar. So let's just look at extremes here, just for the sake of time. We spent some time on this in Matthew's Gospel, so I don't want to spend forever on it. The extremes we have here would be, one would be the Herodians, who are, you can tell by the name, are very pro-Rome. It was Caesar who appointed Herod as tetrarch over Galilee and Syria. And on the other extreme are the Zealots. The Zealots are the Antifa of the day, if you will. They're the anarchists. They're really domestic terrorists here, to where they would use guerrilla warfare to kill Romans, Roman soldiers, those who may work for the Roman Empire, like tax collectors. And they would often do it in crowds, so that it was harder to know exactly who the assassin was. It is actually the Zealots whose rebellion leads Rome to sack Jerusalem, and they end up dying in the fortress Masada. They all commit mass suicide because they didn't want to be taken by the Romans. By the way, in case you care, I always like to point this out, among the 12 disciples was both a zealot and a tax collector. And just to show you the power of Jesus to reconcile people. But you can see this question is loaded here. It isn't just what is your view on taxes, but what is your view of government? What is your view of the Roman system? Where's your view of Jewish liberty here as the people of God? And so there's a lot going on here. And Jesus' question in verse 20, or Jesus, what he starts saying in verse 24 is significant. Show me a denarius. Now, the other Gospels really play on this, but it goes to show that though they might have been critical of paying taxes to Caesar, they had no problem with using the system for their own benefit. The fact they have a denarius on them, which is a day's wage, shows that they have no problem bringing the image of Caesar into the temple. Remember, Jesus is teaching in the temple. So right away, Jesus is already highlighting some of their hypocrisy. And so Jesus asks, I trust you know, whose likeness and image is on it, which, of course, picks up language from Genesis 1 and 2. They said Caesar's. And he said, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God. So what did he just say? Pay your taxes. I don't like it any more than you do. Pay your taxes. Right? Paul will say, pay taxes to whom taxes are due, render to whom what is rendered due, give honor to whom honor is due, pay tribute to whom tribute is due. Right? Be the sort of citizen who respects the law and the rule of order. That doesn't mean there isn't a time and place for rebellion. I do believe in civil disobedience. Even during pandemic, there is a limit to government authority, and I'll stop it there before I get in trouble. But you'll notice what is missing here. It says they were not able in the presence of the people to catch him in what he said. But there's a follow-up question there, isn't it? If you are to give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, in this case taxes, and give to God the things that are God's, the question then follows up. Who or what bears the image of God? It's you and me. You and me. See, what matters here isn't taxes. What matters here is faithfulness. What matters here is submission to the word and will of God. What matters is worship. And so here we should pause and ask, are you rendering to God the things that are God? Your life, your will, your desire, your wants, your needs, all of that? be honest, many of us are more faithful to paying taxes and more eager to pay taxes than we are to render to God that which is God's. This is why this is such a brilliant answer that Jesus gives. Well, then we get a question about the resurrection. Don't want to spend a lot of time on this. If I recall correctly, we looked at it in Matthew's Gospel. We meet the Sadducees, so we go from the spies to the Sadducees. They deny that there is a resurrection, and so they deny the existence of the soul. The Sadducees only believe in the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, the Mosaic Law. They rejected all the others of what we call the Old Testament now, just the Hebrew Bible then. And so the Sadducees think they can trick Jesus. They reject the resurrection. They're going to prove the resurrection is false. So they use the scenario from the Levirate marriage. That is, a woman is married to a guy, her husband dies. Okay, it is then the responsibility of his brother to then marry, and the children they have are heirs to her first husband. Well, the second brother dies, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh. Right, 7 brothers. Now, at some point, we would think we would be suspicious of this wife, but nevertheless, that's not in the story. And they mockingly say, in the resurrection, whose wife will she be? Which of the 7 brothers? And Jesus says, basically, well, none of them. Right? There's no marriage or given into marriage in the kingdom of God. And then his answer is really given in verse 37. But that the dead are raised, thus affirming the resurrection, even Moses showed in the passage about the bush, the burning bush, where he calls the Lord the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, God of Jacob. Now, he is not the God of the dead, but of the living, for all live to him. And some of the scribe answers, Teacher, you have spoken well. So what Jesus wants us to see here is not so much the importance of marriage and giving a marriage and all that sort of stuff regarding our future existence in heaven. What matters is the resurrection, which is true not only in terms of an eschatology, that is, our view of the end times, what happens after we die, stuff like that, is important because this anticipates the resurrection. Jesus is the first fruit of the resurrection. The Sadducees won't believe the resurrection because they reject resurrection in general. And so Jesus is anticipating what is to come and preparing them for that. Well, let's look at one last part here at the end, verse 45 to 47. So Jesus has dealt with them. He deals with another controversy, 41 to 44. But nevertheless, verse 46, Jesus is very clear. Beware the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and love greetings in the marketplaces and the best seats in the synagogues and the places of honor at feasts, who devour widows' houses and for a pretense make long prayers. They will receive the greater condemnation. This is one of the major problems with religion. It eventually becomes about me and not about the one I claim to worship. So among the Pharisees, they dressed in such a way to bring honor upon themselves. They spoke in such a way that people would favor them, and they would sell religion for their own profit. For a pretense, they would offer long prayers. By the way, that is true not just of traditional religion. You've heard me say, if you've been with me during all these devotions, it's true of secular religion, to where you will say what needs to be said, you'll do what you think that needs to be done in order to get the approval of the crowd. Remember, religion always results down one of 2 paths: pride or despair. Here we see the danger of religious arrogance. But for many, we see the devastation of religious despair. And woke religion will lead people down an avenue of despair because you cannot keep up with it. You can't. And you'll never be righteous enough for secular woke priests. Now, one other thing to note about this, because it'll come up tomorrow. Notice that the religious system devours widows' houses. Guess who we meet at the beginning of chapter 21? A widow who gives her last penny to the temple. And Jesus will say, this system will come crashing down. See you guys, Lord willing, tomorrow.